Hello, 7th grade. Today we're going to be looking at how to find the percent of a whole. We've worked a little bit with percent problems before. This is going to be kind of expanding on that. And the first thing I want to do is to reiterate what the definition of percent is. So we'll do that in yellow right here. And percent is a fraction out of 100. So it's going to be a fraction with a denominator of 100, and that's just what percent means. Already saying that we know what the denominator is makes it so that we can write the percentages a lot easier and kind of have a shorthand. So that's what percent is and why it's useful to us. So we're going to start looking at a little bit more complex problems today. And one of those things that we're going to look at is a problem that looks like 30% of students ride the bus, and 210 students do not. And then the question would be how many students do not ride, or how many students ride the bus. So this is a really weird kind of question. And we're going to solve it just like we would our ratios. So trying to figure out how many students ride the bus. And we know that 30% of students ride the bus, but we don't know the total. And we know the exact number of students that don't. But the good news is that percents are always out of 100. So that means that 30 out of 100 students ride the bus. But if 30 out of 100 ride it, we can say that 100 minus 30 out of 100 do not ride the bus. And I want to think about this conceptually a little bit for a second. If we have 100 kids and 30 of them do ride the bus, then all the ones that aren't in that 30 don't ride the bus. So to find that, we're going to do 100 minus 30, which is 70 out of 100 that do not ride the bus. So now we know that 70% of the kids, 70 out of 100 is 70%, do not ride it. And that 70% is equal to 210 kids from our problem. So 70% is the same as 210 kids. So we can now say that 70 out of 100 is going to be equal to 210 out of our total. Do a little bit of cross multiplication here. And we get that 210 times 100 equals 70 times the total. Multiply these together, you get 21,000 equals 70 times the total. And divide both sides by 70, and we will end up getting that we have 300 students total. And that was a lot of work, and we're still not done. Don't worry, we'll get to a little bit easier way of doing this in a second. I just want to make sure that I can go through this the long conceptual way so you can see it. So now that we know we have 300 total students, we can say, well, 30% of the total ride the bus. So going through, we know that of, we can write as multiply. 30% means 30 over 100. And our total, we now know, is 300. So we end up getting 30 over 100 times 300 over 1. And that is going to give us 9,000 over 100, which is going to give us 90. So we can now say that 90 students ride the bus. 90 students from this school ride the bus, and that was a really long way of doing it. So we're going to try it a different way. We are going to make a table, and that table is going to have the percentages on one side and the counts on the other. So if I make this table real quick, I know that my groups I have are going to be ride bus, don't ride, and the total. So I'm going to divide this up into 3 sections here. And from there I'm going to use this table to figure out exactly how many kids are in each group. So I know that 30% of my kids ride the bus. So 30% of my kids ride the bus. And in total I'm going to have 100% of kids. I also know that my count of kids that don't ride the bus is 210. That means that there are, if I counted all the kids that don't ride the bus, I would have 210. So that fills in the count. And now I have to figure out what else can I fill in. So percentages need to add up to 100 because they're out of 100. So 30 plus something is 100, and that something's going to be 70%. And now I can look at these and do my ratio problems again. So I have that 70 to 210 has to be the same as 30 to the amount of kids that ride the bus. So the way I do that is I write 70 over 210 equals 30 over the number of kids that ride, which is what I'm trying to find. I can do my cross multiplication here. I get that 70 times the number of kids that ride the bus, so that's times my question mark, is equal to, it's going to be 6,300. If I divide by 70, I can get that my question mark is going to be equal to, once again, 90 of the students that ride the bus. So that's 2 different ways of doing things. This second way took a lot less room than the first way we did up here that had all those steps. So the table is definitely the way to go here. Let's look at one more problem, which says that we have a student that answered 17 of 20 questions on a test correctly. So she got 17 out of 20 correct. Let me do this in a different color so it's more obvious it's a new problem. We're going to have 17 out of 20 correct. So I'm going to make my table again with percent and count. And I'm going to go down, and this time my categories are going to be correct, not correct, and total. Just like that, I can make a nice little chart. I know that she got 17 correct out of 20 total, which means if I do a little bit of math here, she would have gotten 3 not correct. So she got 17 correct, 3 not correct. That adds up to 20 total questions. And I know that the total number of percent is always going to be 100. So that is always there. So now it wants me to figure out what percent of questions she answered correctly. So I'm going to make my ratios again, and my ratios are going to be from there to there and there to there. And when I do that, I'm going to get that something compared to 17 is the same as 100 compared to 20. So I linked up this question mark with the 17, and I also linked up the 100 to the 20. So we're going back and forth in these rows. And what I end up getting through cross multiplication again is that 20 times the percent correct has to be equal to 100 times 17. So I'm going to go through and multiply this. I get 20 times the percent correct is equal to 1700. And then dividing by 20, I will end up getting 85%. So my question mark is going to be 85. And looking up at the table, I can fill that in with 85 here. And that means that she got 85% correct. I'll box that in. So we've seen percentages before. It shouldn't be too bad going on from here. Please remember to do the practice set along with the notes from this video, and I'll see you guys in class.